Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something a little unexpected. You've heard the cliches, you've seen the clickbait, but tonight it's just you, my voice, and a quiet unraveling of a truth that most men would rather eat a cactus than admit out loud. Older women, 4 simple things, and how those 4 things done just right can make grown men completely lose their minds. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Let's see who the real night owls are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk into the night, not too fast, not too slow. Like you've done this before. Like you know the street and the story behind it. Above you the stars flicker like the eyes that once followed you. Some were full of awe, some with regret, and some still linger, even if the men they belong to are long gone. Tonight, you remember the very first time you realized, without question, that you made men nervous. Not with red lipstick, not with a fancy dress, but by simply pouring tea, slowly, deliberately, and the man across from you, usually in control, just went silent, like you'd flipped a switch in his brain. That might have been the moment. You stepped into this story without asking for permission. You didn't wonder, am I being noticed? You just existed. And that was enough. History's funny like that. In ancient Egypt, age was power. Women grew more respected as they aged. Cleopatra wasn't a teenage seductress. She was a woman with strategy sharper than a desert blade. Older women weren't just admired. They were unavoidable. And men? Well, men today may roll their eyes, but deep down they're wired the same. They crave what they don't understand. And mature women, you've become the mystery they can't stop thinking about. You felt it, didn't you? That shift? Not in your body, but in how people looked at you. It's like someone updated the app you never downloaded. Suddenly someone calls you mom, even though you're still wearing your college hoodie. Weird, right? It's like the universe forgot to tell you you've leveled up. Here's a little secret. In an anonymous survey, don't worry, I won't bore you with the source, over 60% of men over 30 admitted they're secretly attracted to older women, not because of some weird fetish, but because you know what to do with the air in the room. You don't rush to fill silences. You don't panic when there's a pause. You let it linger. And that's when a man's imagination, simple as it is, goes absolutely wild. Experts still debate why exactly men lose their minds over mature women. Some say it's about emotional intelligence, others point to stability, confidence, or just plain old experience. But you know that last time you walked into a room, hair a little messy, smile unapologetically your own. At least 3 men looked at you like you'd stolen the recipe for immortality. Remember that time a younger woman asked, "What perfume are you wearing? You smell powerful." And you didn't answer, not because it's a secret, but because what they're smelling isn't in a bottle. It's in how you walk in, like the room already belongs to you. Picture this. A summer night. You step out in a loose white shirt, old jeans, no makeup, no plans, just out to grab milk. And yet 2 strangers try to accidentally lock eyes with you because you're not trying, and that right there is the magic they can't handle. Now maybe you're wondering, is this all some kind of trick? Nope. These aren't tactics. They're side effects. Side effects of everything you've survived, every heartbreak, every time you chose peace over approval. You're not here to impress. You're here because you exist. Fully. Finally, you sit down in a cafe, no agenda, and the young barista stumbles over her words. She doesn't even know why she's nervous, but we do. You've lived, and you're not sorry about it. So tonight, lying there in the dark with this voice in your ear, think back to the last time you made someone nervous with nothing but a single sentence. Maybe it was, "I'm not drinking tonight," or "I like eating ice cream in the winter," or just a quiet little smile, like you're remembering something no one else gets to know, and they lost it because they weren't. Invite it in. You've already started, and trust me, this is just the beginning. You wake up later than you used to. Not because you're lazy, please. You've already lived 1,000 lives by 9 a.m., but because somewhere along the way you realized the world can wait. And when you finally slip your feet onto the floor, it's not with urgency, but with authority. Today will adjust to you. That's the second thing older women do, without even trying, that drives men absolutely mad. You move differently, not in the hip-swaying red carpet entrance kind of way. No, it's subtler than that. You move like time owes you an explanation. Like you've already survived the storm and now you just float quiet and unbothered, while everyone else scrambles to impress people they don't even like. Men notice this. They may not admit it, but oh, they feel it. It's that moment in a grocery store when you pause, just slightly longer than expected, before picking up a peach. You're not rushing, you're choosing. And a man nearby suddenly finds himself thinking about softness in a way he hasn't since he was 13. Historically, there's a reason for this fascination. In feudal Japan, older geishas were more revered than the younger ones, not for their beauty, but for how they moved. Every gesture had weight, every glance intent. They didn't fidget, they didn't flutter, they floated. And you've got a little of that in you now. There's something strange about pace. We're used to associating it with youth. Fast, spontaneous, bursting energy like soda fizz. But there's power in slowness, in deliberate movement, in looking over your shoulder, not because you're unsure, but because you choose to let someone catch up. And sometimes you look, and no one's there. And you're fine with that. A little-known fact: the human brain processes slow, deliberate movement as a signal of confidence and control. That's why predators in nature rarely rush. The lion doesn't sprint unless it has to. It walks, stretches, waits, and everyone knows something's about to happen. That's how men feel when you walk into a room. Not because you're doing anything theatrical, but because your steps don't ask for attention, they command it. You ever notice how your shoes sound louder now? Even if you're wearing flats, it's not the floor, it's not the shoes. It's that people around you are just quieter, and your movement slices through the noise like a hot knife through cheesecake. Experts still debate why men get so drawn to mature women's energy. Some blame evolution. They seem like better long-term partners. Some say it's maternal projection. Others say it's just the voice of experience that lingers in your aura. But there's no real agreement. Only one truth: they're watching, and they don't even know why. There was a day, you remember it, when you realized you no longer needed to walk like a lady. You weren't trying to be graceful. You were Grace, in sneakers, with messy hair, buying batteries, and still, the man behind you in line at CVS forgot why he was even there. Funny how movement became your language. You say so much without a word. When you lean in at dinner, the table holds its breath. When you reach for your wine glass, someone across the room decides they're suddenly thirsty too. When you tilt your head just slightly, like you're not buying what they're selling, he rethinks his whole pitch. Remember that one awkward guy, mid-30s maybe, who stumbled over his own name just because you stepped onto the elevator? You didn't say a word. You just stood there, poised, phone in hand, eyes scanning the floor number like it owed you something. And when the doors opened, he stood still, because your presence had already pulled the oxygen out of the room. You don't hustle anymore. You pace. You don't rush. You arrive. And when you leave, they notice, even if they pretend not to. And here's the wildest part. You didn't practice this. It's not some confidence course you took online. This is what happens when life teaches you that you don't need to earn space. You just need to stop apologizing for taking it. So when you pull that cardigan tighter around your shoulders or sling your bag across your back like you're heading into battle, just know someone's watching, trying to figure you out, trying to guess how a woman can move like the whole world bends slightly to make way for her. You want to know the real secret? It's not the way you walk. It's that you no longer chase anything. Not youth, not approval, not even love. You've become the still point in a spinning world, and he's dizzy because you're not. And so the second thing men can't handle about older women is how you move, because it's not just physical, it's poetic, and it reminds them, without a word, that you don't need to be noticed to be unforgettable. You don't flirt like you used to, not with giggles, not with hair flips. You flirt with silence, with presence. And when you say someone's name just once, soft like a secret you're about to tell, they lean in before they realize why. That's the third thing older women do that makes men lose their minds. You communicate with precision, not with noise, not with volume, but with accuracy. Like a well-aimed arrow, your words land exactly where they're meant to, sometimes with heat, sometimes with comfort, but always with intention. It didn't used to be this way. There was a time when you filled the air with explanations, over-apologies, and polite laughter. Remember that version of you? She was lovely, but she's gone now. And in her place stands someone who knows a single well-timed pause speaks louder than 1,000 rushed reassurances. History proves it. In Renaissance Italy, salons weren't just for art and poetry. They were arenas. Women who ruled those rooms did so not with loud debates, but with surgical insight. A raised eyebrow could derail a duke, a whispered opinion could change a law, and today you hold that same power with fewer corsets and far better skincare. There's a strange little truth not many people know. The average adult listens for just 7 seconds before they start mentally preparing a reply. But when you speak, people pause, not because you're loud, but because your words matter. Men can't multitask your voice. They either listen fully or risk missing something that might haunt them later. Experts still argue about why older women's communication is so disarming. Some say it's the cadence, slower, more melodic, less reactive. Others point to vocabulary, clearer, less filler, more truth. But many agree. It's not just what you say, it's what you don't bother saying anymore. You've stopped over-explaining your boundaries. You've stopped softening your no into a maybe. Now when you say, "That doesn't work for me," it lands like a full sentence, period. No emojis needed, and let's not even get into your texts. You don't play the game, no triple dots, no passive-aggressive gifs, just directness, with A side of wit so sharp it could slice through a man's insecurities like a hot knife through his fragile ego. Remember that dinner party last fall? Someone told a story that wasn't true, and you didn't argue. You just raised a brow, sipped your wine, and said, "Huh," and the whole table went silent. Because that, "Huh," it said everything. Or that time a younger woman asked, "How do you always know the right thing to say?" And you laughed, not because it was funny, but because she didn't know you've learned the right thing to say is often nothing at all. There's something terrifying about that kind of control. To a man who's used to being the loudest, in the room your stillness is thunder, your restraint earthquake. They can't compete with your quiet. Because your quiet knows things. Once, at a bookstore, you complimented a man's choice in poetry. Nothing romantic. Just, "That's a good one." He nodded like it was casual, but you could feel it. He thought about that for days, because you weren't trying to flatter, you were being real, and that kind of attention, it's like a drug. It's funny, isn't it? You used to think you had to be on to be interesting. Now you just show up, tell the truth, and if they don't like it, that's their story to carry, not yours. Even the way you ask questions has changed. You don't do polite small talk. You say things like, "What made you give up on that dream?" Or, "When was the last time you felt peaceful?" And just like that, the conversation goes from surface to soul. And he's sitting there wondering how a woman he barely knows just made him feel known. Here's the kicker. Men aren't used to being heard by women who don't need anything from them. And you don't need them to like you. You choose them, maybe, or maybe not. That uncertainty, it's irresistible. And when you laugh, not the polite laugh, not the one you practiced in your 20s, but the real one, full-bodied, deep, with a tiny snort at the end, it cracks open something inside the room. It says, "I'm not here to entertain you. I'm here to enjoy myself." So that's the third thing. Men can't handle how you speak, how you withhold, how you make every syllable feel like a decision, and maybe they never will. But they'll never forget it either. There's a shift that happens somewhere along the way, quiet but seismic. You stop saying sorry when you mean move. You stop shrinking in doorways, stepping aside in crowds, letting everyone else go first as if your presence is optional. And suddenly you take up space. That's the fourth thing that drives men wild, whether they admit it or not. You own the room. Not in the loud, look at me, social media influencer way, but in the deeply unsettling, deeply magnetic, why does the air feel different now kind of way. And you don't even need to do anything special. You just exist unapologetically in your own gravity. It starts when you stop waiting to be invited. You walk in, you sit down, you cross your legs, comfortably, like it's your favorite chair. And something in the energy shifts. Men feel it. That undercurrent of, she's not here to be chosen, she already chose herself. Historically, there's precedent. Catherine the Great didn't wait for anyone to hand her the Russian Empire. She took it by owning every room she entered, even when the room hated her for it. She didn't wear a crown because it sparkled. She wore it because she could, and somewhere deep in your bones you get that. Not because you're trying to rule anyone, but because you finally realized you were never meant to beg for space. You are space. You ever walk into a restaurant alone now? Not because you couldn't find a date, but because you wanted the wine, the window seat, and the peace. And the way the waiter looks at you, half confused, half mesmerized, tells you everything. You don't look lonely. You look expensive. There's a strange psychological fact most people don't know. The more comfortable you are with stillness, the more dominant you appear in social hierarchies, which is wild because you used to fill silences with nervous words, but now you sit in them like a cat in a sunbeam, warm, unbothered, entirely sure the world will come to you. Experts are still scratching their heads. Some say it's hormonal. Some say it's confidence from experience. Some argue it's just what happens when a woman finally gets sick of pretending to be nice. But no one really knows, just that something clicks. And suddenly you stop waiting for permission. You dress differently now too. Not necessarily trendier, but on purpose. Like every thread says, I know who I am and I'm not dressing for your imagination. You wear lipstick because it makes you feel good. You wear black, not because you're hiding, but because it turns your aura into a sharp silhouette. And when you wear something bold, men stare like it's performance art, because it is. It's you, unfiltered. There's this time, remember it, at a friend's party. You weren't the loudest or the youngest or the most traditionally hot. But somehow every man in that room noticed you. Why? Because you weren't performing. You weren't trying, you were just centered. And that's rare. And they knew it. You used to think confidence was a volume thing. But now you know better. It's a posture. It's saying no without a smile. It's walking past someone you used to obsess over and not even glancing. Men don't have a playbook for this version of you. They're used to chasing youth, chasing noise, chasing women who still think being chosen is the prize. But when they meet you, someone who chooses herself every single morning, they're shaken, not because you're intimidating, but because you're free, and freedom looks good on you. There was that one guy, tall, confident, charming in a dated kind of way. He tried to banter. You gave him 3 sentences. He fumbled on the 4th. Why? Because you weren't playing the role. You didn't giggle. You didn't flatter. You simply asked, "Are you done now?" And just like that, the power dynamic collapsed. Funny how many men confuse control with charisma. They're not ready for a woman who doesn't need saving, fixing, or proving. You don't walk into rooms to be liked. You walk in to be real, and that's what makes them lose their grip. You've become your own main character, and not in the social media, curated life kind of way, but in the lived it, earned it scarred and glowing kind of way. When you sit on the edge of the bed in the morning, pulling on your boots like a warrior choosing her armor, you're not thinking about who's watching. But if they are, they'll never forget it. So that's number 4. You own the room, quietly, deeply, fully, and no one knows what to do with that kind of presence, least of all the men who swore they liked confidence, until it wasn't flattering them directly. There's a difference between being mysterious and being unclear. You're not a riddle. You're a locked room, with the lights on, music playing, and the key resting quietly in your own pocket. If someone wants in, they'll have to knock like they mean it. And that's the 5th thing older women do that flips men's internal compass. You reveal just enough. Not too much. Not too fast. Just a glimpse, a flicker, like the edge of a secret. That smells like jasmine and feels like déjà vu, and it drives them mad. In your 20s, you told your whole life story over appetizers. You explained your dreams, your heartbreaks, your favorite movies, as if laying it all out would make someone stay. But now you let silence do the heavy lifting. It's not about playing hard to get. It's about being hard to forget. Remember Matahari, the exotic dancer turned spy in the early 1900s. She didn't seduce with her body. She seduced with suggestion, a half glance, a turned shoulder. Men filled in the blanks with fantasies they built themselves. And even now, long after her execution, no one can say with certainty who she really was. You carry that same energy now, not because you're hiding, but because mystery, when rooted in self-respect, becomes a form of power. Here's something most people don't realize. The human brain craves pattern completion. When someone sees a part of your story, they need to fill in the rest. It's neurological. You leave out the ending, and they'll imagine a dozen versions, each one more elaborate than the last. That's why, when you mention a place I lived, once you did then change the subject, he'll think about it for hours. Where was it? Why did you leave? Was it warm there? Experts can't agree on why this works so well. Some say it's the pacing. Others argue it's emotional intelligence. But one thing is clear. You've learned the art of letting someone earn your story instead of dumping it at their feet. You're like a good novel now. Not a page-turner, a slow burn. Every word, every look, every memory you share, it all feels like a choice, like a rare wine, uncorked only when the night feels right. And let's be honest, men aren't used to that. They're used to oversharing. Instagram captions, late-night texts. Here's everything I've ever felt. Validate it now, but you offer presence, not proof. And that changes the whole game. There's that time you told someone, I don't talk about that on first meetings, and the way they blinked like they'd never heard that sentence before, because they probably hadn't. No one tells them no with a smile anymore. But you did. And suddenly, you weren't just a woman, you were a boundary. You've stopped turning your life into bullet points. Now when someone asks, what do? You say, enough. And that's it, because you've realized if someone's only interested in the title, they're not ready for the story. There's also the matter of timing. You reveal things slowly, not to manipulate, but to savor, like an expensive dessert, like secrets, whispered in candlelight. You talk about your past, not like it's a wound, but like it's a poem. Not he broke my heart, but that season taught me clarity. Not I failed, but I learned to let go. That kind of reframing, it makes a man wonder, if this is how you tell the truth, what must the lies have sounded like? It's not about hiding trauma or pretending everything's fine. It's about sharing from the scar, not the scab. Because you've lived long enough to know, not everyone deserves front row seats to your healing. There was that one guy, younger, charming, a little too eager. He asked, why are you being so guarded? You replied, I'm not guarded. I'm just not a vending machine. And his face, pure confusion, tinged with awe, because he's used to access equals interest, but you've evolved. Now, access equals earned trust. And that subtle shift, it unravels every shortcut he's ever relied on. Remember that rooftop, evening, warm breeze, city lights. You told someone a story about a letter you once burned. No context, no name, just that it had perfume on it, and it smelled like regret. He laughed. You didn't explain. And he spent the rest of the night wondering who that letter was for. The mystery ate at him in the most delicious way. So here you are, not mysterious like a trick, but like a sea cave only visible at low tide, and only to those patient enough to wait. That's the fifth thing. You share yourself like a secret, not to tease, to treasure. There's a kind of silence that feels louder than a scream. You know that silence, you've used it. Not to punish, no, never that. But to draw a boundary so clean, so crisp, it feels surgical. And that brings us to the sixth thing. That drives men absolutely crazy. You don't argue anymore. Not because you don't care, but because you care too much about your peace. There was a time, wasn't there, when you'd stay up at 2 a.m., thumb hovering over your phone trying to type the perfect response. You'd replay conversations in the shower, write imaginary comebacks, send long texts with bullet points and emotional timestamps, but not anymore. Now, you log off, you breathe, you let them wonder. It's not apathy, it's evolution. You've realized that explaining yourself to someone who wants to misunderstand you is like yelling into a canyon, only your own echo answers back. And somehow, the moment you stopped explaining, they started chasing. This isn't a tactic. It's a recalibration of your emotional economy. You've got a budget now, and drama, that's a luxury you no longer fund. Remember the historical story of Eleanor of Aquitaine? Queen of both France and England at different points. Smart, cunning, and when necessary, stone-cold silent. At one point she was imprisoned by her husband for over a decade. She didn't scream, didn't beg. She waited, watched, plotted. When she re-emerged, she ruled with the quiet fire of someone who had survived the storm and refused to become it. You carry that same energy. Not revenge, not noise, just clarity. There's a scientific oddity. Maybe you've heard this. People mirror your emotional regulation. The calmer you are, the more destabilized a chaotic person becomes. It's like showing up to a sword fight with nothing but stillness, and somehow winning, because silence makes people sit with their own noise. You had that one X, remember? Always trying to win the fight. Accusations, projections, late-night drama. You used to play along, used to feed the fire, until one day you just said, okay, and meant it. He panicked. Because without your reaction, he had nothing to push against, no fuel, just a mirror, and mirrors, they don't lie, they just show. Now instead of clapping back, you lean out, you observe, you let people reveal who they are without giving them a script to hide behind, and if they don't like what they see, that's not your burden to carry. Experts still debate this phenomenon. Is it detachment, emotional intelligence, or just exhaustion dressed in wisdom? Either way, it works. You've become a fortress made of velvet, soft to the touch, but impenetrable at the core. It's not that you never get mad anymore. You do, but rage now takes the shape of distance, of unmatched energy, of a simple surgical no followed by peace like a fog rolling in. It's unnerving to those who want you emotional, because they don't understand. Peace is a power. Move. One of your friends once asked, how do you stay so calm? And you smiled, because the truth is, you don't stay calm. You just stay out of places that make calm impossible. You've stopped walking into emotional burning buildings just to prove you can handle the heat. Now you watch them from the distance and wonder why you ever thought that was love. There's that time at the family gathering. The relative with the passive-aggressive comment. Old, you would have snapped. New you. You refilled your glass and looked at the ceiling fan like it was your favorite painting. Didn't even blink. They didn't know what to do with that, because you didn't give them the script. And people hate it when they can't predict your next line. The younger men, they especially don't know how to respond to this. They're used to emotional ping-pong. They serve chaos, expect a return. But you just let the ball bounce once. Then walk away from the table. They call you cold. You call it choosing yourself. So that's number 6. You no longer argue. You observe, you release, and you move in silence like a breeze that rearranges everything. They don't know how to handle that, because they've been taught that control comes through conflict, but you've learned that the real power is the one who doesn't flinch. Some women wear perfume. You wear presence. It enters the room a second before you do. Not loud, not flashy, but like warm incense curling through the air, undeniable even if no one can name the scent. And that's the 7th thing older women do that quietly drives men wild. You own the room without trying. You don't announce yourself. You arrive, and that changes the energy instantly. In your younger years, you might have walked into a place hoping you looked good enough, worried about the lighting, the angles, the way your jeans clung to, tight in the wrong places. But now, you walk in like you paid for the building, because confidence doesn't mean you think you're better than everyone. It means you're not afraid to be exactly who you are. There's this historical moment, maybe you remember it, when Josephine Baker performed in Paris in the 1920s. She didn't speak much French, but she didn't need to. She walked on stage and stood still for 30 full seconds. The crowd silent, hooked, because sometimes presence doesn't need movement. It just needs rootedness. You've got that now. Your feet don't just touch the floor, they claim it. And it's not about how you look. It's how you carry what you've lived. There's a kind of curve in your spine that says, I've bent for things worth bending for. Never again. There's a calm in your step that whispers, you don't have to impress me. I'm already full. Here's something odd. Did you know people's heart rates sync up in the presence of someone calm and grounded? Yeah, it's real. Your nervous system walks into the room like a tuning fork, and suddenly everyone's breath evens out. He might not even know why he can't stop staring, but his body knows. It recognizes someone who no longer needs anything from the room, and that's what makes the room lean toward you. Experts still debate what exactly causes this effect. Some say it's earned charisma. Others call it mature magnetism. One researcher described it as a gravitational field made of grace. But whatever you name it, one thing's clear. You don't compete anymore, because when you walk in, the competition becomes irrelevant. Think about that last dinner party. Everyone buzzing, all the voices overlapping. And then you walked in. You didn't say much, just smiled, tilted your head, poured a glass of wine, and the entire conversation shifted. Suddenly, it wasn't about impressing. It was about listening. Because your presence slows things down, like a jazz beat at midnight. There's this young guy you met, early 30s maybe. He said, I can't tell if you're flirting or just that confident. And you just looked at him, held his gaze and said, maybe both. His ears turned red, his drink got warm. He didn't know what to do with that, because he was used to women giggling for approval, not giving it like a gift that might disappear if he didn't stay interesting. You also dress differently now, not to attract, to reflect, to say, this is how I feel about myself today. You're just lucky to witness it. There's that black dress you never lend out, that lipstick you wear when you don't need courage, only punctuation, that silver ring from your solo trip to Morocco. A reminder that you don't collect jewelry, you collect stories, and when you speak, you don't rush. You let silence hang at the end of your sentences like a drop of honey waiting to fall. You pause mid-thought, not to remember, but to revel in the thought. people lean in closer when you talk. Not because you're whispering, but because you've made listening feel sacred. You had someone once ask, "How do you seem so unfazed?" And you replied, "Because I've learned not everything needs my reaction. Some things just need my absence." He blinked. You didn't smile. You just sipped your coffee and looked out the window like the sky owed you an apology. This kind of presence can't be faked, can't be bottled, can't be filtered. It's earned through heartbreak, triumph, boredom, rage, surrender, and dancing barefoot in your kitchen at 2 a.m. when no one's watching. It's what happens when you stop asking, "Do they like me?" and start wondering, "Do I enjoy this moment?" That's the seventh thing. You walk into a room like you belong in every version of your life. And men, they feel it like a low hum in their chest. They can't name it, but they chase it. We've still got ground to cover. You still with me? He thinks he's the one being mysterious. You just smile and let him believe his shadows are captivating, his silence is deep. Meanwhile, you're 10 steps ahead, reading subtext like it's subtitles on a show you've already seen. And that's the eighth thing men can't handle when it comes to women like you. You read the room. And the man too well. You're not psychic, you're just practiced. Years of watching body language, tone shifts, eye flickers. You've turned intuition into a second language. You know when someone's performing kindness versus living it. You can tell when a compliment has a hook inside. When an apology is really a negotiation. When "I've just been busy" is code for "I thought you'd still be here." And here's the kicker. You never say a word. You just note it. There's a strange and brilliant woman in history you'd enjoy. La Malinche, an indigenous woman from the early 1500s, who became the interpreter, advisor, and yes, confidant of Hernán Cortés during the Spanish conquest of Mexico. Many called her a traitor, but historians now suggest something more complex. She was the only one who actually understood everyone in the room. The only one who spoke all the languages, literal and emotional. You carry a similar talent, not in words, but in knowing. It's that moment when a guy tells a story that doesn't quite add up. You don't correct him, you just raise one eyebrow, barely. And somehow, that one tiny gesture makes him sweat more than a full interrogation ever could. There's a fact not many people know. Humans, especially women, can detect micro-expressions in under 1/25th of a second. You've honed that superpower into an art form. One flinch, one dart of the eye, one awkward swallow. You file it away in your internal library, not for revenge, just for context. Experts still debate whether this is empathy, evolved survival instinct, or something else entirely. But the effect is the same. He feels seen, not in the soft, flirty way, but in the way that makes him feel slightly naked, like you've read his search history and his soul. This is why younger women sometimes ask, "How do you always know?" And you just chuckle. Because it's not magic, it's memory, it's pattern recognition, it's surviving liars and lovers and learning they're not always different. Think of that time at the art gallery. He stood too close to the woman in red, said it was an old friend. You didn't ask questions, you just complimented the painting behind them. Interesting how some things are only beautiful from a distance. He heard it. Oh, he heard it, and you didn't need to explain a thing. There's an elegance to how you call things out, without calling them out. Your gift is precision, not drama. That's what twists them up inside, because they expect confrontation. What they get is clarity, and clarity is terrifying when someone's hiding something. You remember your ex's nervous laugh, don't you? The one that always came after he said, "You're overthinking it." You learned that translation quickly. I'm trying to gaslight you before you notice the truth I just leaked. You didn't fight him on it. You just started packing your things, mentally at first, then physically. He never saw it coming. Because while he was focused on distracting you, you were already opening the next chapter. You've stopped giving people the benefit of the doubt. Not because you're bitter, because you're experienced. You know now, when someone shows you who they are, don't write the sequel. He might say you're intense or hard to read. That's because you've mastered the subtle art of mirroring confusion back. You don't explain yourself. You let his mind do the unraveling. Here's something weird. Did you know the human brain is more afraid of being observed than being judged? You're not judging him. You're just watching. And he feels that spotlight like a heat lamp, because deep down he knows you see everything he's not saying. So no. Your power isn't in shouting, it's in witnessing, not reacting. Just recognizing you don't need receipts. You've got instincts, and instincts don't lie. That's the 8th reason they go a little mad around women like you. Because when you look at them, they feel like a story being read aloud with every plot twist noticed. Still breathing. Good. It starts with a question. He asks, "What are you looking for?" And you laugh, not because you don't know, but because it's been so long since anyone asked the right question. And that's the 9th thing older women do that undoes men completely. You know exactly what you want, and you say it, not with a checklist, not with desperation. With the calm precision of someone who has sent back enough undercooked steak to know that taste matters more than presentation. There's a clarity in you now, the kind that doesn't come from wishful thinking. It comes from trying, failing, repeating, and eventually choosing peace over potential. You're no longer impressed by 6-packs or 6-figure incomes. You're impressed by kindness under pressure. By a man who can apologize without turning it into a TED Talk. By quiet generosity, the kind that folds your blanket when you weren't looking. There's a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt. You probably have it scribbled in an old journal somewhere. Do what you feel in your heart to be right, for you'll be criticized anyway. That's the energy you walk in with now. You want a relationship that feels like Sunday morning, not Saturday night. You want a man who listens when you speak, not just when you whisper. And most of all, you want to be chosen, not chased. Did you know that in ancient Greece, women over 50 were considered spiritual advisors to kings, not because they were magical, but because they had seen enough to separate noise from truth? You carry that same air. You're not here to please. You're here to align. That's terrifying for a lot of men, because clarity demands clarity in return. And let's face it, many aren't ready to name their own desires. They want to be wanted, not understood. But when you say, "Here's what I want," it forces a reckoning. It shines a light into places where they still mumble. Experts still argue over why direct women intimidate so many men. Some say it's evolutionary conditioning. Some say it's fragile masculinity. One recent theory says, most men have never had to face their own incoherence until a woman with standards walks in. Makes sense. You once told a man, "I'm not looking for butterflies, I'm looking for roots." He smiled like he understood, but he didn't call again. That used to hurt. Now you're grateful, because the faster someone disqualifies themselves, the less time you spend rehearsing their potential. There's this idea in your 20s that love is about fixing each other, helping him heal, showing him how to love you. But now you want someone who's already done the work, or at least someone who's not afraid to start. No more teaching someone how to hold you. No more convincing someone you're worth their presence. Remember that man at the bookstore, the one who made small talk in the philosophy section. You liked his eyes, steady, a little tired, but warm. He asked, "What kind of books do you like?" And you said, "Ones that teach me how to leave the wrong people faster." He blinked, laughed nervously, and muttered something about Camus. But you saw it, that flicker of respect. Like maybe he'd met a woman who wasn't looking to be deciphered but mirrored. This confidence, this clarity, it didn't come from winning. It came from walking away. From nights where you cried and still refused to text back. From dinners where you smiled even when you felt invisible. From relationships where you loved harder than you were held. You don't regret them. You just don't repeat them. There's this strange biological fact. Your brain literally rewires itself in your 40s and 50s. The parts that care deeply about approval, they dim. The parts that crave purpose, peace, authenticity, they light. Up like a neon sign in a blackout. You feel that now. In your bones, in your choices. So when he asks what you want, you say, "I want peace. I want laughter that doesn't come at my expense. I want truth, even when it's messy. And I want connection that feels like breath, not bargaining." And if he stutters, if he hesitates, if he looks away, you know he's not it, and that doesn't break your heart. It saves it. That's the 9th thing, love. You speak your needs without apology. You know your price, and you won't lower it for someone who doesn't even know what they're shopping for. Take a sip of water, stretch a little. It always begins the same way. He's charmed by how unbothered you seem, how you sip your coffee like time obeys you, not the other way around, how your smile doesn't beg for approval. It just exists, and then it happens. He gets curious. He asks, "Why are you still single?" And that's the 10th thing older women do that makes men short-circuit. You don't fear being alone. You prefer it over being poorly partnered. Your alone is not lonely. Your alone is choosing quiet over chaos. It's sleeping diagonally, dancing in the kitchen, and never wondering if he'll text back. See, when you were younger, alone was a punishment. Now, it's a sanctuary. It's a funny reversal, isn't it? In your 20s, people asked, "Are you seeing anyone?" with hope in their voice. Now they ask it with pity, but the truth they can't wrap their heads around is this: you have crafted a life that fits you like silk, and you won't tear it just to let someone else squeeze in. Here's something most don't know. Jane Austen never married. She wrote love stories that made generations swoon, yet chose her own company over every suitor, not because she couldn't find love, but because she knew her value in a world that begged her to settle. You get that now. You've been proposed to, not always with a ring, but with situationships dressed up as destiny, and you said no, or worse, you said yes, until you said no more. Experts debate whether solitude sharpens the soul or hardens it. Maybe it does both. But one thing's clear: a woman who knows how to be alone becomes dangerously discerning. You're not scanning rooms for potential, you're scanning for peace. It's the little things too. You remember being 28 and pretending to love baseball, enduring 5-hour games just to impress someone who didn't know your middle name. Now, you'd leave a dinner mid-conversation if a man speaks over the waiter, not because you're rude, but because you've learned how someone treats The invisible people says everything. There's this fact from psychology. They call it the self-expansion theory. When you're in a healthy relationship, it expands your identity. But most people get stuck in the shrinking version. They become quieter, smaller, more tolerable. You remember shrinking. You remember whispering your needs like they were outrageous. Now, your needs come standard. Not as ultimatums, but as truths. You still love love. Of course you do, but not the kind that drains you. Not the kind that turns your ribcage into a storage unit for someone else's issues. You want love like a fireplace. Warm, contained, steady. Not fireworks. Those burn fast and leave smoke. Think of that moment last fall. You were walking alone through the city, golden leaves scraping the pavement. You passed a couple arguing outside a cafe, whispers laced with rage. And you smiled, not because you enjoyed their pain, but because you weren't in it. You weren't clinging to a relationship for the fear of being without one. Men sense that peace, that you found a rhythm in your solitude, that your days don't need rescuing, and it confuses them, because they were taught to impress, to pursue, to promise. But what do you offer someone who isn't waiting for anything? There's something called social loneliness versus emotional loneliness. Social loneliness is missing people. Emotional loneliness is being surrounded by people who never truly see you. You've chosen solitude to avoid the latter. And that's a flex few understand. You're not looking for someone to complete you. You're looking for someone who doesn't compete with your peace. Someone who says, I see your life, and I want to fit into it, not dismantle it. A younger version of you might have mistaken attention for affection, presence for partnership. Now, you know the difference between a man who shows up and a man who builds something with you. So when he asks, why are you still single? You don't flinch. You say, because I won't trade my solitude for noise dressed up as love. And just like that, he's speechless. Because somewhere deep inside, he knows you're not alone. You're free. That's the 10th reason. Darling, your peace isn't a placeholder, it's the prize. You ever notice how some men walk into a room like they're waiting for applause? That big, puffed-up presence, voice just a little too loud, stories just a little too polished. But you sit back, sip your drink and watch it all unfold like a movie you've seen too many times. And that's the 11th thing that makes older women unforgettable. You're immune to performance. You crave presence. See? You've sat through enough dinners where a man's resume took up more space than his actual soul. You've smiled through monologues, nodded politely through rehearsed charm, and now you just let them talk. Because you know, the ones who perform the most often feel the least. There's a moment always where he realizes you're not laughing out of obligation, where your silence isn't submission, it's evaluation. That's when the cracks begin. Because nothing unsettles a performer more than an audience that's not impressed. History's full of women who saw through the act. Take Mata Hari, for example, spy, dancer, seductress, but also deeply aware. She saw through generals and lovers, politicians and princes, not because she was trained, but because she watched, really watched, just like you. You know the difference between connection and charisma. One makes you feel seen, the other makes them feel important. And men aren't used to being seen for what they are underneath the applause. They think the watch will dazzle you. They think the travel photos will intrigue you. They think success, seduction. But you're looking at his eyes, not his car keys. You're listening for truth, not titles. There's a rare neurological trait called high sensory processing. Sensitivity. Only about 15–20% of people have it. It means you pick up on subtle shifts, tones, and energy. Congratulations, you might be part of that group. You don't just hear what people say. You feel what they mean, and that, my love, is your superpower. So when he drops names, brags about exes, casually mentions the crazy woman who wanted too much from him, you already know. This isn't a conversation. It's a stage show. And you didn't buy tickets for this performance. You want presence. The kind that leans in, the kind that pauses, the kind that notices when your smile doesn't quite reach your eyes and gently asks, "You okay?" You want someone who's with you, not just in front of you. That reminds you, remember that jazz night downtown? The one where you met the guy who talked like he was reciting a podcast? He said all the right things, held the door, ordered the wine, laughed at his own jokes, and by dessert you felt exhausted, not because of the pace, but because you could tell. He wasn't there with you, he was selling himself. You've outgrown the pitch. Now you wait for stillness, for slowness, for the quiet confidence of a man who doesn't need to be dazzling, just genuine. Experts still argue whether this craving for depth is a maturity thing or a trauma response. But they agree on this. It marks a turning point, a moment when you stop chasing intensity and start choosing intimacy. There's a saying you once heard: don't confuse the man who lights up the room with the one who lights up your world. You've lived that difference, felt it in your bones, and now you wait for the glow, not the glare. Your time is too sacred now to waste it nodding at performances, playing therapist, or guessing what's behind the mask. So you let the performers talk, and when they pause for applause, you just smile and excuse yourself, because you've learned, if someone needs to be the main character, you're in the wrong story. That's the 11th thing, isn't it? You're not asking to be impressed. You're asking to be met. No act, no script. Just two humans, unpolished and real, choosing presence over pretense. Still with me? Good. Let your eyes relax. Let your breath deepen. It begins subtly. He asks you where you're from, and you can tell instantly he's not really listening to the answer. He just wants a cue to launch into his story, his timeline, his version of the world. But you've learned the art of listening, not the passive kind. The kind that cuts through noise and reaches into essence. And that brings us to the 12th thing that drives men wild in ways they don't even understand. You ask better questions, not because you're trying to be deep, not to impress, but because curiosity has become your compass. It's not about finding someone interesting, it's about finding someone interested. There's a myth that intimacy comes from shared experiences. That helps, sure. But real intimacy, it blooms when someone asks you a question that makes you pause, makes you look inward, and answer with something you didn't even know you believed. You ask those kinds of questions, and men aren't always ready, because no one's asked them in years. What breaks your heart when no one's looking? What kind of silence do you trust the most? Who did you pretend to be just to be loved? They freeze, they laugh nervously, and sometimes they answer with something rehearsed. But the good ones, the brave ones, they stay in the pause. They find the words. They meet you there. There's a fact you once read. In ancient Japanese culture, tea ceremonies weren't just about tea. They were structured rituals designed to slow people down, to invite presence and vulnerability. That's you now. a walking tea ceremony, slowing the world down with your questions, making space for answers that aren't hurried or filtered. Remember that guy at the art museum? You asked him, "What kind of beauty makes you ache?" He blinked like you'd asked him the square root of longing. He said, "No one's ever asked me that," and just like that, you knew you'd never be invisible to him again. See, in your younger years, you asked questions to fill space, to flirt, to be liked. Now you ask to connect, to see, and in return, you've learned how to listen, not to respond, but to receive. Experts call this empathic curiosity. It's rare, it's powerful, and it literally lowers cortisol in the other person's body. That's right, your questions calm people down on a chemical level. Your presence says, "You don't have to perform here, you can be." That's unsettling for men who are used to being praised for surface, because you're not distracted by the edges. You go for the root. They say, "I work in finance." You say, "What made you choose that path? Was it joy or safety?" They say, "I'm divorced." You say, "What part of yourself did you rediscover when it ended?" And suddenly, they're not flirting, they're remembering, they're reconnecting with themselves through you. There's a strange, little-known historical fact. In 18th century France, salons were hosted by women who curated conversations between poets, philosophers, artists. These women weren't passive hosts. They were revered for their ability to ask the right questions. You, my dear, would have owned a salon with candlelight and the kind of laughter that rises slowly from the gut, because that's what you create now, not just attraction, but atmosphere. And questions are your architecture. Most people live in answers they never examined, beliefs they inherited, assumptions they outgrew but never updated. But when you ask, "What does safety look like to you now?" you gently knock on the door of that inner house, and if they open it, you step inside and remind them what honesty feels like. Not everyone's ready. Some men will ghost you just because you made them feel something too close to truth. Let them go. You're not here to drag anyone towards self-awareness. You're here to dance with those who already feel the music. That's the 12th reason men lose their balance around you. You don't chase spark. You invite depth. You ask better questions. And then you listen like it matters, because to you it does. The night grows softer now, but we're not done yet. There's more to uncover, more to laugh about, more to feel. He thinks he's being subtle. The little corrections, the sly suggestions about what you should wear, how you should laugh a little softer, maybe not talk so much about your expat year in Lisbon. And once upon a time, maybe you'd have smiled, nodded, adjusted. But now, you lean in closer. Look him dead in the eye and say, that sounds like a you problem. And that's the 13th thing older women do that makes men spin in circles. You refuse to be edited. This is the point in your life where your edges are no longer negotiable, where your quirks aren't up for revision, where you don't water yourself down for anyone, not even the ones who say they love bold women, as long as they're not too much. When you were younger, you mistook criticism for connection. You believed if someone cared, they'd want to tweak you, improve you, refine you. But let's be real. Refine was always code for reduce. You remember the first time someone said you'd be prettier if you smiled more, or when they asked if you were really going to wear that lipstick color, and at first you did smile more. You did wipe off the lipstick, until one day you didn't, because you realized the edits were never about you. They were about their comfort. And you, darling, no longer make yourself smaller just so someone else can feel tall. Fun historical fact. Cleopatra, yes, that Cleopatra, once stormed a diplomatic meeting with her enemies rolled up in a carpet. Uninvited, unedited. She didn't ask to be softened. She arrived. You've got Cleopatra energy now. You enter spaces as is. There's a term psychologists use, self-concept clarity. It means you know who you are. And the more of it you have, the less susceptible you are to other people's opinions. That's you. You walk into a date already whole, so when someone tries to nudge you toward palatable, you feel it like static in a symphony. Here's the thing, men are often taught to pursue, but not necessarily to receive. They know how to chase you, but can they hold all of you? That's the test, because you're not going to sand off your sharpness just to be held. You're not going to hide your ambition, or your stories, or your laugh that sometimes snorts. At the end, you're not waiting for someone to tolerate your fire. You're looking for someone who hands you more wood and says, "Let's make it burn brighter." You remember a conversation once, a man who told you, "You're kind of intimidating," and you smiled, not sweetly, but slowly, because you understood. That wasn't a compliment. That was a confession, a whisper of insecurity wrapped in faux flattery. The truth. You intimidate only those who aren't ready, and being too much just means you've finally stopped being less. You once dated a guy who flinched every time you used big words. He joked about your book collection like it was a challenge, tried to explain Hemingway to you who literally taught literature once, and yet you tolerated it for a while, until the day he called you opinionated, and you responded, "Better than being unoriginal." You ended it that night, not out of anger, but out of a quiet, sacred promise to yourself. Never again will you shrink to fit someone else's version of desire. There's a legend from the Viking Age, shield maidens who fought alongside men in battle, not because they were allowed, but because they simply refused not to. You would have been one, sword in one hand, unapologetic truth in the other. So now, when a man tries to tidy your spirit, to soften your voice, to revise your boundaries, you simply say, "No edits tonight, this version's final," and he either rises to meet it or walks away, looking for someone more manageable. Spoiler alert, he'll be back. They always come back, because the edited version may be easier, but it's never as magnetic. That's the 13th reason, sweetheart. You stop treating yourself like a draft. You're not a rough copy waiting for approval. You are final, you are fierce, and you are done asking for permission. Night's deep now, and so are you. Let the shadows curl a little closer around her room. Take a sip of something warm. There's a moment, quiet, unassuming, when he realizes the power dynamic isn't what he expected. Maybe it's the way you lean back in your chair, unbothered. Maybe it's the way you say no, with the same tone you'd use to decline a paper napkin. Or maybe it's just your silence, thick, unhurried, not begging to be filled. And it hits him. You don't need him. That's the 14th thing that drives men wild. You choose them, but you never need them. There's a difference, and they feel it like a chill. You're not waiting by the phone. You're not rereading text to decode hidden affection. You're not planning your day around the possibility of his attention. You're living, and if he fits into the rhythm of your life, great. If not, well, the jazz still plays. Need is loud. It clings, grasps, molds itself into a shape more likely to be kept. But choice is quiet. It says, I'm good, I'm whole, but I see you, and I want this. Let's dance, if you can keep up. It throws some men off, especially the ones used to being chased, or the ones whose value depended on being needed, financially, emotionally, even sexually. But here you are, ordering your own dessert, scheduling your own getaway, sleeping just fine in your own bed, and smiling like someone with secrets she never has to explain. You remember a guy who once said, I just want to feel important to someone. And you said, then be important to yourself first. I'm not here to complete you, I'm here to witness you. He blinked, like you'd just read his tarot cards in reverse. Here's the thing, evolution wired women to seek security, to pair off, to be cautious. But you've rewritten that code. You've built your own security, emotionally, financially, spiritually, and that makes your love radically free. You're not here for a savior. You're here for an equal. There's a forgotten piece of history. In ancient Sparta, women owned land, chose their lovers, trained in combat. Men had to earn their presence. Love was not duty, it was respect. You carry that legacy now, a woman who owns her space, who says, this is what my life looks like. You can join me if you bring peace, not chaos. That kind of clarity, it's rare. And it's intimidating, because let's face it, a lot of men grew up thinking their worth was tied to being needed. They don't know what to do with someone who cooks for herself, handles her finances, fixes her faucet, and still flirts. Like a poet, scientists still debate whether this kind of independence threatens traditional relationship bonds. But they agree on this. The healthiest connections come when two whole people meet, not when two halves are desperately trying to complete each other. There's power in your self-containment, not coldness, not detachment, but the kind of warm autonomy that says, I am the cake, love is just the icing, you don't need a partner, you want one. Big difference. Remember that trip to Morocco, where you navigated Medina's solo, haggled like a queen and danced under lantern light? You didn't wait to be taken. You took yourself. And now, if someone wants to join the journey, they better bring their own damn map. You've stopped performing softness just to soothe someone else's ego. You've stopped dialing yourself down. And ironically, that's what draws them closer. The ones who stay. They're not trying to be your son. They're just thrilled to orbit your gravity. So when a man says, I don't feel needed, you smile, slow and sure, and say, you're not needed. You're wanted. That's so much better. And deep down, he knows it's true. That's the 14th thing. You no longer attach your value to being chosen, because you're the one doing the choosing now, not from a place of scarcity, but from fullness. And my God, does it shake them? We're almost there now. Just one last stretch before we land. Let the glow from your screen soften a little. Let your shoulders drop. So here we are. The night is full and humming, the kind of deep, quiet that makes your thoughts stretch their legs. You're curled into yourself now, warm and alert, and he's still wondering how you do it. What's that last piece? What's the final, breathless, can't stop thinking about you thing older women do that makes men unravel in the best possible way? Simple. You own your sensuality, not rent it, not borrow it from filters, trends, or someone else's fantasy. You own it. You don't flash it like a billboard, and you don't hide it like a secret. It's woven into how you walk, how you breathe, how you laugh when something genuinely delights you, and it's not about sex. It's about presence. See, there's a particular kind of quiet power that comes from a woman who knows what she likes. and says so, who touches her own arm like it's worth touching, who eats strawberries like they're sacred, who doesn't apologize when she wants more of anything. In your 20s, maybe you confuse sexy with performative, the push-up bras, the contorted poses, the high heels that felt like penance. But now you're barefoot, in a worn shirt that's softer than anything silk could ever pretend to be, and still, somehow, you look devastating, because sensuality at your age isn't a show. It's a signature. There's a forgotten myth about Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of love, that she wasn't the youngest or the most modest. She was simply the most undeniably herself, and that's what made gods kneel. You understand this now. You don't flirt to lure, you flirt to play. Like language is a silk ribbon, and you've learned exactly how to tie it, loosen it, knot it again, not to impress, but because it feels good. You might lean in just slightly, drop your voice half a step and ask, "So, what was your favorite mistake?" You're not trying to seduce. You're just not afraid to be fully awake in your body. Here's the wild part. Researchers have found that people over 40 report more satisfying intimacy than they did in their 20s. Why? Because the pressure's off. The goal isn't performance. It's connection, pleasure, truth. There was a man once, sweet, handsome, a little cautious, who said, "You're very grounded," and you smiled. Because what he meant was, "You're in your body, and I don't know how to follow you there yet. But the good ones, the ones who stay, they learn, they listen, they match the rhythm. You teach with your ease, with the way you don't rush, with how you notice his hands, the pause in his breath, the way his story shifts when he feels seen." And suddenly intimacy becomes not a race, but a garden. Tended, explored, delicious. Experts still debate whether this confidence is social or biological, whether it comes from age or experience. But they all agree, when a woman is in tune with her own body, her attraction multiplies, even if nothing else about her changes. It's energy, it's magnetism, and it's unmistakable. You remember an afternoon, dim light, jazz in the background, your bare feet on tile, a glass of something red. He watched you slice fruit slowly, and you knew in that moment he was more undone than if you'd stripped. Because sensuality is not shown. It's felt, and you've mastered it. This, finally, is the 15th reason men go crazy when older women move through the world like their skin is a celebration, not a project. When they flirt because it's fun, not because it's required. When they make eye contact that says, "I like you, not please like me." You don't need to be desired. You already are, by the universe, by your own reflection, by the air that clings to you like a long-lost lover. But when you choose to turn that gaze towards someone, when you invite them into your orbit, it's no wonder they lose their minds. And now we slow. The journey's been winding and warm, each moment like a page turned slowly by candlelight. So I want you to do one last thing. Take a deep breath. Feel your ribcage expand. Feel your body exist, not for anyone else, but just for you. You've earned this softness. You've earned this power, so let it settle around you like silk. The screen glows gently. The hum of night surrounds you. You're not rushed. You're not chasing. You are still, and in that stillness you are undeniable. Let it fade now. Let your thoughts quiet. Let your body rest.